feel like you're just kind of stuck? Like you're working hard and making okay money, but still can't seem to get ahead.
Yeah, like almost trapped.
Exactly. That's kind of the whole idea behind what some people are calling the new poor. And it's something we're going to deep dive into today. We're going to look at this article called 15 Signs You Are the New Poor.
And we'll see if any of these signs resonate for you.
Yeah. And more importantly, we'll talk about some ways you might be able to, break free.
It's important to remember that we're not trying to label anyone. It's really more about seeing if you recognize any of these patterns and understanding how these little things can actually add up.
Yeah, totally. So let's jump right in. The first sign is something a lot of people experience, living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
You earn enough to cover the bills, but there's not much left over at the end of the month. So what makes this a vulnerable position to be in?
Well, just imagine. Your car breaks down or you have a medical bill you weren't expecting. Suddenly, your budget is totally thrown off. That's the danger of living paycheck to paycheck, right? It leaves you with basically no margin for error. Just one little thing can send you spiraling.
Yeah, that actually leads perfectly into the next sign, no emergency fund.
Right.
Experts always say you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up. But let's be real.
Yeah.
That feels impossible for a lot of people.
You're right. Saving that much can seem really overwhelming, especially if you're already stretched thin. But what if you start smaller?
Okay, yeah.
Even $10 or $20 a week can make a big difference over time.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Every dollar you save is one you don't have to borrow when something unexpected happens.
Yeah, it's like slowly building up that safety net.
Exactly.
I think another thing that makes saving tough is credit card debt.
Oh, for sure.
It's so easy to just swipe that card, but then those interest rates can be brutal.
Yeah, this is where things get tricky because when you're using your credit card for basic groceries, gas.
Yeah, the things you need.
That's often a sign you're spending more than you're bringing in. And it can trap you in this cycle where you're relying on credit just to get by, and those minimum payments keep you in debt for years and years.
So it's not just the amount of debt, it's also the structure of it.
Exactly.
Speaking of problems, what happens when the debt keeps growing even though you're trying to make the payments?
Oh, that's definitely a sign that something needs to change. Maybe you need to look at your budget again or look into something called debt consolidation or even talk to a financial advisor. The key is to do something before you get in over your head.
Yeah, because I imagine when you feel overwhelmed, it's hard to think about anything else.
Right.
Like investing, for example. You hear all this talk about building wealth, but how are you supposed to even think about that when you're just trying to pay the bills?
That's a good point. But a lot of people think you need a ton of money to start investing. But even small investments, if you keep doing them consistently, can really grow thanks to compound interest. Like a snowball effect, but with your money.
Okay, so it's not about having to put in a huge chunk of cash all at once. It's more about making it a regular habit.
Right.
Even if it's with small amounts. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I already have a side hustle just to make ends meet.
Yeah, and that's important to mention because having a side hustle is a little different.
Right.
They're great for a little extra income or exploring something new. But if you're relying on a side hustle just to pay your bills, well, that could be a sign that your main job isn't paying you enough.
So it's more about making sure your main income is solid.
Exactly.
Okay, last one for this section, and this is a biggie. Rent. Especially in some cities, it feels like rent eats up a huge chunk of your income.
It really can. The general rule is that you shouldn't be spending more than 30% to 40% of your income on housing. But in a lot of places, especially big cities, rents are going up way faster than wages.
Yeah.
So people are left with less and less money each month.
And that can make it really hard to save, which makes it harder to move to a more affordable place.
Yeah, it's like you're stuck.
Totally. So just to recap, we've talked about living paycheck to paycheck, the need for an emergency fund, being careful with credit cards, what to do when your debt keeps growing, the idea that you don't need a ton of money to start investing, how side hustles fit into all of this, and the impact of high rent.
Are any of these things sounding familiar?
Do any of these resonate with you? And we're back. So we've been talking about these signs of the new poor, and I think it's important to remember that this isn't about judging anyone.
Yeah, it's about awareness.
Right. It's just about understanding how this financial pressure can kind of sneak up on you.
Exactly. And sometimes those pressures come from unexpected places like healthcare.
Even with insurance, healthcare costs can be a burden.
Totally.
Co-pays, deductibles, and then there's those unexpected bills that pop up.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy. You're already dealing with a health issue,
Oh.
and then boom, you get hit with financial stress on top of it.
Totally.
It's not surprising that healthcare costs cause so much debt.
And our source actually mentions people putting off going to the doctor because they just can't afford it.
It's a scary thought,
Yeah,
but it shows how connected health and finances are.
for sure.
But even in a system that can feel so complicated, there are things you can do.
Yeah, what kind of things?
Being proactive about researching providers, comparing costs, and you can even try negotiating payment plans if you need to.
So being your own advocate, even in the healthcare system.
Right?
Okay, speaking of things that can be expensive, let's talk about education and training.
Right.
It feels like these days you constantly have to be learning new things to stay competitive,
You really do.
right?
Yeah, and that's where that new poor trap can really get you. You need a better job to afford the training, but you might need the training to get the better job.
It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Exactly.
But our source does mention that there are resources like scholarships and grants.
Right. And even programs your employer might offer.
Oh, it's true.
And don't forget all the amazing stuff online, free information, online courses. There's so much you can learn without spending a fortune.
Okay, so let's change gears a bit. I want to talk about something that can be kind of tough.
Yeah.
Dipping into retirement savings.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people feel like they have no other choice when they're facing a financial crisis.
Right.
But what happens down the line when you do that?
It's kind of like you're taking a loan from your future self.
Okay.
And often it's a really expensive loan. You're reducing how much you'll have in retirement. And those early withdrawals usually come with extra fees and taxes.
So you're losing money in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, it might be better to see if you can reduce your spending or increase your income or talk to a financial advisor to see what your options are.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of brings up another point, the emotional side of all of this. There's often so much shame around money problems,
For sure.
which can make people not want to ask for help.
It can feel really lonely, like no one else is going through this.
Yeah.
But you're not alone. Talking to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, or a professional can really help, not just for advice, but also for support. Everyone goes through financial challenges.
It's so true. And I think that sense of support is so important because another sign the article mentions is feeling hopeless or like things will never get better.
Right. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're always struggling.
Yeah. And it's hard to even imagine a different future.
But it is possible to change things. Even baby steps can make a difference if you keep at it.
Right.
It's about changing how you think about money.
Okay, how do you do that?
Shifting from, I don't have enough, to what can I do to create more? Focusing on what you have control over.
I love that. It's about taking back your power, even in small ways.
Yeah.
Okay, now this next one is kind of heartbreaking. Having to give up things because of money problems, like vacations, hobbies, even starting a family.
Yeah, that can really take an emotional toll.
They can.
But sometimes you have to get creative and find other solutions.
Like what?
Maybe you can find free ways to enjoy those things or really think about what brings you the most joy and prioritize that.
So it's about balance.
Exactly.
Making sure you're not totally depriving yourself of the things that make life good.
Right.
Okay, last one for this section, and I think this is something everyone can relate to. Feeling stressed or anxious about money.
Oh, that constant worry is exhausting.
I know.
And it can affect everything, how you sleep, your relationships, even your health. It's important to find ways to manage that stress.
What are some things you can do?
Talking to a therapist, relaxation techniques, even just finding time to unplug and recharge.
Yeah, because ultimately your financial well-being is just one part of your overall well-being.
It's all connected.
So we've explored healthcare costs, the need for continuing education, dipping into retirement savings, the emotional impact of money struggles, the importance of getting support, and how financial stress can affect you.
It's a lot. But stick with us, because in the next part, we'll talk about some practical things you can do to break free from the new poor trap and build a more secure future. All right, so we've spent some time talking about these new poor signs. But the good news is, just knowing about them is a good first step to making some positive changes.
Exactly.
So let's shift gears and talk solutions. What are some actual things people can do to start taking control?
That's where things get really exciting. We hear a lot about budgeting, and I know that might sound boring, but it's really about awareness, understanding where your money goes so you can make smarter choices.
I used to think of budgeting as like restricting.
Yeah.
Like I was being put on a financial diet or something.
Right.
But I've realized it's more about aligning your spending with what you really care about.
Like if travel is a big thing for you, maybe you cut back on eating out so you can save for that trip to Italy.
Exactly. It's not about depriving yourself. It's about making your money work for you.
Right.
And there are so many apps and tools out there now that can help you keep track of your spending and set financial goals.
It's almost like they turn finances into a game.
Yeah.
Which can make it more fun. Okay, so for a lot of people, debt is a huge roadblock.
For sure.
We've talked about how overwhelming it can feel, but what are some ways to actually tackle it?
One thing that's become popular is the debt snowball method.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It's based on this idea that small wins give you momentum. So you focus on paying off your smallest debts first, no matter what the interest rate is.
Oh.
And as you get those paid off, you feel good, like you're accomplishing something.
Yeah.
And that keeps you going.
I like that, focusing on those quick wins.
Yeah.
Our source also mentions debt consolidation. What is that, and when might it be a good idea?
Debt consolidation is basically taking all your different debts and combining them into one.
Yeah.
And often you can get a lower interest rate, so it makes it easier to manage your payments, and you could end up saving money in the long run. But it's really important to shop around and make sure the terms are good for you.
It sounds like a good strategy if it helps you pay less interest and get out of debt faster. But what about earning more money? Sometimes it feels like you're hitting a ceiling at your job, and it's hard to even know where to start looking for something new.
Absolutely. One of the best things you can do is really focus on your skills.
Okay.
Think about what skills are in demand in your field. Or maybe explore something totally new that you're interested in, and then find ways to learn and get better. Remember, investing in yourself is the best investment.
I've also heard networking can be really helpful for finding new jobs or opportunities.
Oh, definitely.
Do you have any tips for people who are kind of intimidated by networking?
It's totally normal to feel that way, but networking is really just about building connections and meeting people who have similar interests.
Okay. Yeah?
So start by going to industry events, or join some groups online, or even just reach out to people you admire and ask for an informational interview. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to share their experiences.
That's a good point. And don't forget about negotiating your salary.
Oh, that's important.
Sometimes we forget to do that.
We really do. It's crucial to know what you're worth. Be prepared to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Do some research and see what others in your industry are making. Highlight your achievements, all the great things you've done, and be ready to explain why you deserve a raise or a promotion.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, let's circle back to something we talked about before, building an emergency fund.
Right.
For some people, saving even a little bit can seem impossible.
Yeah, but start small, even if it's just $5 or $10 a week.
Yep.
The key is to make it a habit. You can even set up automatic transfers to your savings account, so you don't even have to think about it.
It's like tricking yourself into saving.
Exactly.
And then as you start earning more, you can always increase how much you're saving.
Okay, I know this can be a scary topic for some, but let's talk about investing. It often feels like something that only rich people do, but our source encourages everyone to explore it.
Yeah, and this is where that compound interest thing really comes into play.
Right.
Even small amounts, if you invest them regularly over time, can grow like crazy.
Oh, Huckley.
And there are so many options now that make investing easier than ever.
Like what?
Things like low-cost index funds, or even fractional shares.
Okay.
It's about taking control of your future and building wealth, even if it's one little investment at a time.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. Breaking free from the new poor trap isn't about some overnight miracle.
Right.
It's about changing how you think about money and building habits that support your financial well-being. Exactly. It's a journey. Yeah. It's not about reaching a specific destination.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are resources out there, people who can help, and most importantly, you have the power to create a more secure and fulfilling financial future for yourself.
You really do. It's